Hello and welcome to Safety Tavern's video on hot work. Now, keep in mind, again, I have an electrical background. That doesn't mean I'm an electrician, but I have an electrical background with safety, and hot work means something very different. I am not talking about electrical hot work. Please understand me, at no time in this video will I be referring to electrical hot work. This is flame work, okay? Using a flame, sparks, that kind of thing. Generic OSHA 1926 version of hot work. Let's get into it.
1926 352 Alpha. When practical, objects to be welded, cut, or heated shall be moved to a designated safe location. Or, if the objects to be welded, cut, or heated cannot be readily moved, all movable fire hazards in the vicinity shall be taken to a safe place or otherwise protected. 1926 352 Delta. Suitable fire extinguishing equipment shall be immediately available in the work area and shall be maintained in a state of readiness for instant use. You, as an employer, need to have the right fire extinguisher. That does not mean look over at the GC's fire extinguisher and go grab theirs. No, that is the GC's fire extinguisher for compliance with building code, regulation, and construction requirements. That is not your task fire extinguisher. Go get another fire extinguisher. Let's take a look real quick at a suitable fire extinguisher. If this is the possible fire that could result in what you're doing, this is not acceptable. Yeah, no. And that doesn't mean go to the opposite side of the spectrum and get some giant fire extinguisher. You need a fire extinguisher that is suitable to put out the fire. Now, for me personally, a lot of my companies that I've worked for, I've mandated that it's a 30-pound fire extinguisher because I want something that can actually put out a fire. If you are unsure or if you don't have experience in this, you need to talk to the competent person of your company. And if you are a competent person, then I strongly recommend that you go to the fire department and you ask them to run you through some fire extinguishing drills. That way you can understand just how little agent is actually inside of those containers. That way you don't have a false sense of security when you have this little tiny fire extinguisher and you're trying to put out this good sized fire. 1926 352 Echo. When the welding, cutting, or heating operation is such that normal fire prevention precautions are not sufficient, additional personnel shall be assigned to guard against fire while the actual welding, cutting, or heating operation is being performed, and for a sufficient period of time after completion of the work to ensure that no possibility of fire exists. Such personnel shall be instructed as to the specific anticipated fire hazards and how the firefighting equipment provided is to be used. There's been a question in the industry: how long should you actually stay there once the welding or the flames or sparks are completed? That is up to your GC, your company, your safety manual, whether it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I've seen some companies that stay as far as an hour goes. But there definitely needs to be a wait period to make sure everything is cooled off. And I don't mean like a minute. I don't even mean like 5 minutes. Best practice is somewhere between 15 and 30 minutes. I've seen a re-spark happen up to 20 minutes later. So I'm pushing 30 minutes for the Safety Tavern, but again, talk to your competent person for flame and hot work. If you're a fire watch, you need to stay awake. You need to be paying attention to what's going on. You need to be looking for fire. Do not be standing here looking directly at the welding spark. You need to be in the vicinity, have the fire extinguisher accessible, but you need to be available. 1926 352 Foxtrot. When welding, cutting, or heating is performed on walls, floors, and ceilings, since direction penetration of sparks or heat transfer may introduce a fire hazard to the adjacent area, the same precautions shall be taken on the opposite side, as are taken on the side on which the welding is being performed. 1926 303 Charlie 7. All abrasive wheels shall be closely inspected and ring tested before mounting to ensure that they are free from cracks or defects. 1926 303 Charlie 8. Grinding wheels shall fit freely on the spindle and shall not be forced on. The spindle nut shall be tightened only enough to hold the wheel in place. 1926 303 Bravo 1. Grinding machines shall be equipped with safety guards in conformance with the requirements of the American National Standards Institute Bravo 7 1 1970 Safety Code for Use, Care, and Protection of Abrasive Wheels, paragraph D of this section. 1926 154 Charlie. Stability. Heaters, when in use, shall be set horizontally level unless otherwise permitted by the manufacturer's markings. And I will throw another one on top of this, also the manufacturer's manual. If you read the manual and it says it's okay, then that's okay. Otherwise, it's got to be horizontal. 1926 353 Echo 1, welding, cutting, and heating not involving conditions or materials described in paragraph B, C, or D of this section may normally be done without mechanical ventilation or respiratory protective equipment, but where, because of unusual physical or atmospheric conditions, an unsafe accumulation of contaminants exists, suitable mechanical ventilation or respiratory protective equipment shall be provided. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a welder try to kick out this little tiny fan. That is not acceptable ventilation. These are good ventilations types of fans. Like we need to seriously get some air moving. And I have a very special hatred of welding fumes because there was a long time ago when I was a young buck and I was told, make sure you drink milk tomorrow morning. And I was like, what? What do you mean drink milk? The guy that I was working with, he told me, hey, we're going to be cutting on some galvanized metal and the fumes will make you sick. I was like, what? The protective measures is me to drink milk? So understand what you're cutting on, understand, and not just the material itself, but also what chemicals are caking around it. Do you need to grind all the chemicals off before you start actually heating up this metal? Ventilation is not just the actual welding lead that's burning, or it's not the stick that's burning. It's also what material you're cutting into, as well as what goop is on it from previous, or paint, or whatever. All of that needs to be taken into account. 1926 353 Echo 2. Employees performing any type of welding, cutting, or heating shall be protected by suitable eye protective equipment in accordance with the requirements of subpart E of this part. Which PPE should be used overall, whether it's gloves and boots and all this, this is all going to be pulled from the manufacturer's recommendations of your welding machine. You take that, you marry that in with your company practices, you marry that in with your GC practices, you marry that in with OSHA's regulations, as well as any state, federal, or other applicable regulations, and that is where you have your level of PPE that's necessary. And again, we always go with whatever the most strict thing is to figure that out. 1926 350 Gulf 2. Torches in use shall be inspected at the beginning of each work shift for leaking shutoff valves, hose couplings, and tip connections. Defective torches shall not be used. 1926 350 Hotel. Regulators and gauges. Oxygen and fuel gas pressure regulators, including their related gauges, shall be in proper working order while in use. 1926 300 Alpha. Condition of tools. All hand and power tools and similar equipment, whether furnished by the employer or the employee, shall be maintained in a safe condition. Now, what happens is, if you have a question about something specifically, an OSHA regulation, you can send a letter to OSHA. And if OSHA sees merit in it, OSHA will respond, and more importantly, they'll publish something called a letter of interpretation. This is a letter of interpretation pulled from August 4th, 1999, OSHA's position on deviations from the manufacturer's guidelines of scaffolding. Now, granted, this one's talking about scaffolding, but it absolutely paints OSHA's exact impressions and their directions on deviating from manufacturer's recommendation. The manufacturer normally uses engineering calculations, testing results, and other considerations in preparing its guidelines on procedures and limitations. The standard itself does not mandate compliance with those guidelines. However, to deviate from them and still meet the requirements of a competent person, that person would need to have a very high level of knowledge. A level that would enable him or her to understand the concerns the guidelines are meant to address and to determine that the deviation would not result in a hazardous condition. Mere experience that the scaffolding had previously been used in a way that deviates from the guidelines with no apparent failure is not a basis on which a competent person or an employer could proceed. Such experience could be purely a product of luck. Again, this was kicked out in 1999. And if there's any doubt as to why we're talking about manufacturer recommendations, it is because that little pamphlet that comes with that tool, with that machine, that is going to tell you exactly what you need to wear in order to operate this. Follow that. Do not deviate from that. And if you do deviate from that, you had better have some market research, some significant amount of documentation proving that you made, as a competent person or as an employee, you made a competent decision, right? And you should always talk to your supervisor before you decide to just throw away not only manuals, but also all the rules that go along with using this specific tool. I'm going to jump over to just a good safe practice, and that is barricading the area as well as signage. And for both of these, take up as much room as you need to keep people out. You got this sign right here, and who is this sign going to warn? Who's going to see this? You're going to be looking at the welding flash before you even see the sign. Move the signage out. Also, if there's people walking by or people could randomly walk into the area, put up danger tape. Occupy the area. And I don't mean caution tape, I mean danger tape. Keep them out, keep them away. We want them away from the fire. This is red danger tape, not caution tape. Overall, inspect everything. Inspect your machine, inspect the area you're working at, inspect the environmental hazards that are going to interfere with you, and inspect the material that you're going to cut, inspect your PPE, make sure that everything is in keeping with the best possible safe practices we have. If you're unsure about that, talk to the competent person for heat work or for fire work or for flame work or for hot work, whatever you want to call it. Talk to your competent person on your job site or for your company about what you are to do. Now, please keep in mind that whenever we're putting out a fire, the number one priority is safety, that person's safety. So if the fire starts getting out of control, drop and run, right? And in preparation for this, during our pre-task meeting, right, because we shouldn't just grab a fire extinguisher and move on to the area and start welding, there should be a pre-task meeting where we're talking about, okay, this is what we're doing. I've got my fire extinguisher right here. We don't have any other side hazards where we could be welding and something on the other side could catch on fire. We've cleaned out all the debris and all the combustibles as much as we can. And now we got to get into the alarm section. So what happens if this fire gets out of control? The very first thing is the welder and the fire watch, how are they going to get out of the area? And that's where, okay, what is our evacuation route? The next thing is, okay, how do we alert people in the local area? Are we just going to scream? Are we going to bring an air horn? That way we can get everyone's attention? What's going to happen here? The next thing is, how do we alert the GC as well as the fire department if that is what our job site or our company or our GC's plan says to do? So these are all things that need to be discussed in the pre-task meeting. If you have a standard plan, I would review that standard plan at this time.
I hope this video finds you well, and see you in the next one.